So this morning we're talking about training your patient. And like I said, this is the most important thing when it comes to scaling your practice is that we get so caught up in the time that we spend with patients. It does a few things. First of all, it slows us down. It totally dilutes the power of that time you spend with the patient. In other words, the power that you're delivering chiropractic to that patient when you get sidetracked with all kinds of different distractions, and that could be different conversations or questions or whatever that is, patients interrupting your flow, it demeans what we try to deliver. It demeans the effectiveness of that adjustment and that time, that patient interaction, and it destroys your profitability. So this is why we're going to try to talk about creating order, creating efficiency, and creating scalable practice systems so that your practice can grow. So why training the patient matters? Well, obviously, when you have clear expectations, when the patient completely understands the process when they're coming in, when it is very systematic, patients comply better. People like systems. People like to be led. So this is where you can step into leadership roles for you and your team. And when you can train your team about the systems and everybody buys into the systems and follows through with those systems, you get much better compliance with your patients. You have much less drop off. Consistency builds trust with your people. It puts you in a spotlight of professionalism. It causes efficient flow and it increases your capacity. You will be able to start. So if you're only able to see maybe 12 patients an hour at this point, or 15, 16 patients an hour, you'll be able to drastically improve your ability to see more people. You'll be able to jump up to that 20, 24, 30, 40 patients an hour because your systems get efficient. And the last thing is that clarity enhances your results and obviously your profitability. So the first 48 hours, this is where it's really important. So after the patient signs on, we've gone through our day 1, day 2, day 3. They've agreed to the care plan. You've got them set up on their care plan. The next day, day 4, is where you set the expectations. So, and I'm going to say we had a system where we did over 2 days, day 4 and day 5, because there was so much and so many things that we wanted to make sure that the patient understood. And there was some repetition involved. And when there was repetition, we made sure people got it. So we had written and verbal orientation. So not only were they shown the system, they were actually given a brochure or pamphlet or a checklist of what should happen every time they come into the office. So we made absolutely sure that people understood why they were there. And we explained why the flow matters. In other words, when they understood the reason and the importance of the flow, people got it and they were more willing to comply. And then it reinforced the standards through that repetition. So in other words, we had our systems and we bent but didn't break. We didn't break down on those systems. We followed through with them. So we're going to talk about exactly how that all works. And I know this is going to be something, this is going to open a few eyes this morning, because I know there's things that you can improve today, which will get you better results. And you can start training with your team to make sure that those patients understand why you do what you do, or you have the systems that make that adjustment as efficient and effective as possible. So office flow and check-in protocol. So patient comes into the office. What we specifically did is we had a check-in system that was away from the front desk. So if the person coming in for their adjustment didn't need to stop at the front desk for anything, and you have lots of patients, they just want to come in, they get their adjustment, and they're gone. I mean, let's make it as efficient as possible. So we had a check-in kiosk that was away from the front desk, so they would avoid the confusion. So if there's somebody standing at the front desk, they wouldn't have to stand there and wait. We tried to move that congestion. So we had that separate computer terminal where they can come in, swipe in, and go to the next step, start doing their warm-ups and everything else. We had a number system. Some of you might use a digital call system that your computer puts them in a specific order, but we explained why that was important because, people would get adjusted in the order they came in. So it's important to come in and pick their number. We explained why that was important. They would move directly to the pre-adjustment areas, so get away from the front desk. So they would go and they were instructed how to do their tractioning, and we'll get into this, and their wobbling and warm up before their adjustment and why that was important. And here's one thing that our team was really good about. We talked about lobby etiquette. So we talked about noise, because obviously, the phone's ringing, there's somebody at the front desk, there's other people that want statements or whatever else, and we tried to manage these things as best as possible. So we talked about when people came in, how it was very appropriate that the noise be kept at a minimum, conversations be kept at a minimum. Coats were left in the front foyer. So they knew not to bring their winter coats in there, especially in the wintertime. Their boots stayed outside. And you guys know, especially now at this time of year, there's, 9 out of 10 people take their boots off and wear you have Crocs or sandals or something, maybe those disposable slippers, whatever it is you have for them, make it accessible for them to take their boots off and make it comfortable so they're not walking around in wet socks. That is really important. And there's always that one person who doesn't take their boots off, is too lazy to, or just doesn't, and they track in snow and the floor gets all wet. It is so vital to be right on top of that and give your team the authority to stop them and say, you cannot go into the adjusting area with your boots on. Take your boots off. Go back to the front, take your boots off, and make sure you keep that area clean. We actually did keep a mop in the front area just to make sure we tried to keep the floor as dry as possible. But we did have sandals and Crocs for everybody to wear once they took their boots off. And the other thing is children. You know, as much as we invited families in the office and we had a family practice, we wanted to make sure that children were under control. They were not running wild through the office. So we made sure that we had that conversation with patients that were bringing in families. And we had a specific children's area where they could go and play, and it was away from the front desk and it was not in the traffic lane of everybody. So they were out of the way and they could have some fun and make it an enjoyable experience in that area. So then we get to the warm up stage, right? So people go and do their warm ups. And we talked about spinal hygiene and how important warm ups were. And we told them why this was important. Their spine gets warmed up. We exercise the tissues that are supporting those spinal vertebrae and supporting the neurological health. And we said we wanted to make sure that they did their warm ups because the adjustment always would go easier and hold better. That was one of our lines that we used all the time. And people understood that the adjustment goes easier and it holds better after you leave. So that was one thing that we really instilled in the patient. So they would do their wobble chair, the mobility exercises. They would do their wall tractioning, curve restoration routines, whether they're starting with a CerviGuard or whatever the case is. And then, of course, the after adjustment effects, like the vibe plate or head weights, we would explain all that and how the flow worked. And we would always track patient compliance. So our tech CA was always watching, constantly watching, were people doing their traction properly? And she would be consistently correcting people or just guiding people through that process, even if it's sitting on the wobble chair, to do their wobbling effectively. We would talk about how to actually get into the wobbling, because some people just kind of sit there and they just hardly even move on that wobble chair. We want them to make this time as effective as possible. Okay. And then training them to get to the table. So positioning and table readiness. So this was really important. I guarantee this is something that I know most chiropractors don't do and don't talk, because what happens is you walk into the adjusting room or the adjusting bay and the person's sitting up. And when the person's sitting up, you're face to face, and that opens up the door for all kinds of conversation, right? So if we want to focus on table talk, this is the number one thing that has to be addressed: is the patient needs to be in position. So we would talk to them about when they went to the table, they would swipe their key fob in on the computer at the table, at that specific swipe in portal, that keypad. So they would swipe in, so and we would check to make sure and tell them, make sure it's your information that comes up on the screen, and then you lie down. And why do you lie down? Because when you're lying down, your heart slows down, your body relaxes, your mind clears, the adjustment goes easier, and it holds better after you leave. So they understood why. It was for them. So the patient was ready before the doctor arrives, and our team on day 4 and day 5 would explain to them, if you're not lying down, the doctor will skip over you and go to the next person. So you will lose your spot. So please go ahead and lie down. So people understood. And of course, this was something we trained on, that if I walked into a room and we made sure that day 4 and day 5, that was explained to the patients and why that was so important, I wouldn't drop the ball. I would have to say, hey, John, sorry, you go ahead and lie down. Just let your body relax. I'll go adjust the next person and I'll be back to adjust you. And we stuck with that. That was a golden rule, didn't bend and didn't break. So people understood why. So that was one thing that really helped us be very efficient, because it would avoid us getting into all kinds of sideways conversations. So the doctor leaves if the person's not lying down. And then we would have, we would address, or the team would address, if you have questions, because there's going to be days that you're going to come in and want to ask the doctor something. The first order of events is you ask the team. If you come in and have a question for the doctor, ask the team the question first, because the team more than likely can answer that question for you. The doctor's not going to talk much when he or she is in the room. We just kept our conversation to a minimum. So if you have a question, ask the team. If you have a question that's specific for the doctor, we will set up an extra time appointment for you. We will set up a email or a phone call. So that was done out of adjusting hours. And remember, and here's the thing, and I just want to take a step back for a second here. The goal is when you're adjusting people, it is a sacred time. It's so important for you to deliver great adjustments and for those people to get the most healing potential during that time. You have to be in state. And listen, you guys, I know you guys know because you've been there and you feel it when you're in the flow and adjustments are just going so well and you just feel like you're connecting on a spiritual level with every single patient that you encounter during that day. And you get out of that day and it's such a fulfilling feeling for you. And you've had great response from the patients and all kinds of positivity because you're in that state. And it's really important to try to get to that state as often as possible when you're in the adjusting area. So I want to try to minimize as many distractions as possible that are going to pull me out of that state when I'm adjusting. Really important. And I know you guys get that. That's really important. So questions before or after the adjustment, we try to minimize them. And it's a quiet environment during adjusting flow. In fact, there were times, and we did this quite often, is that the team, we would prepare this in huddle, and I would ask the team to share with every patient that Dr. Colin is not talking today. He's in a very specific state. He's just been studying with some of the best and most effective chiropractors on the planet. And he wants to be completely present, 100% present with you during that adjustment time. And I would often tell people if they started talking during the adjustment, I would tell them, listen, I've got your cervical spine in my hands. I want to be completely present with you. Can you just take a deep breath and just be completely calm and still during this time? And then I would adjust them and not say anything. And so we talk about table talk, and sometimes we're so worried about what to say when it's so much more powerful to say nothing, to just be present with the patient. So we would prepare the patients for that is going to happen during your adjustments. The doctor will not talk much during your adjustments, and that's why. And then, of course, after the adjustment, so checkout procedures. So we wanted to make sure that obviously if they had to do their vibe plates and any type of post-adjustment head weights or therapy, whatever, so they would understand how that would happen after their adjustment. They would leave the adjusting table. We made sure that they knew that they had to clean the table and change the headrest paper themselves. That was, again, part of the routine. That was part of the day 4 and day 5 procedures. Every single person knew that was their responsibility. And we would often prepare people that when they got to the table, if for some reason somebody forgot to change their headrest paper, go ahead and just change it for them, forgive them, and then lie down. So, make sure that you get the table ready for you when you're lying down and leave it ready for the next person so they can lie down. So we wanted direct, efficient exit flow. In fact, we had an old house that many of you have come to our office, but we had a double hallway. And what happened was when people, and we actually trained this throughout some of our busy times, is after they got adjusted, they would walk through a little corridor and go exit through the second hallway, which would bypass the front desk. So they could walk in, past the front desk to the check-in portal. They could come do their tractioning, wobbling. They would come and get their adjustment. After their adjustment, they could do their vibe plate or head weights, and then they could walk through this little corridor and exit through a separate hallway. So it was like a big circular flow. And that was really helpful during times where we were seeing, 40 or 50 patients in an hour. It was really, it helped to be very efficient. So think about how you can make your office more efficient with that talk about the flow And the key is to have as minimal interaction as possible with the other people that are coming in and people exiting. We had we had literally everybody on prepayment plans. So, remember when you're accepting people on this pay as you go thing, and I'm really big on this, is that it's so vital to make sure that you and your team get them on some sort of prepayment. If they're not willing to sign up for any care plan options that you have, say, okay, well, we're going to get you to prepay for your first six adjustments or whatever that is. So you're not stopping at the desk every time, and explain that. We're such a busy office. We can't have you stop at the desk every time to put your debit card in or do your payments. We just can't do that. So let's get you on a prepayment schedule and pay for a block of adjustments. But let's make sure we're getting people on those payment plans. All the future appointments are booked in advance. So people were not stopping at the desk to book their next appointment. And then we also had the specific end of visit reminders, which again is a huddle thing that when you're looking at your day sheet, you've got somebody coming up for maybe their next appointment is their reexamination, or maybe it's their re-sign or re-x-rays, whatever that is. Your team makes a note of that, and they're reminding that person before they leave or on their way in. Hey, Bob, great to see you. You're going to get your adjustment today. Remember, next time when you're in on Friday, we're going to be doing your reexamination. So make sure you're here a few minutes early, and remember that we've booked this special appointment for you. So if there's any chance that you can't make it, please make sure you give us 24 hours notice. And we also talked about referrals. And this was a great time too, when they're exiting, to remind them about referrals. And we had, again, that specific list about people who hadn't brought their kids in for an exam yet, or people maybe who brought up a friend of theirs and then nothing happened as a result of that friend being brought up. So the team would make note of that and remind them about the referrals. They would remind them and give them tools to make that referral happen, like that three-way text message, or giving them a gift certificate, or maybe even offering to make a call to that person on their behalf. Okay. So again, that was all part of the pre-shift and huddle procedure. Again, helping with the flow, but still stimulating referrals at the same time. And then here's a few things too. And again, this is something that I really encourage you guys to spend some time with your team and talk about this. When patients are in the clinic, phones go on silent mode. The last thing you want is for people to be sitting on their wobble discs on their phone or texting. This is a healing environment. This is a healing place. We can't have people on their phones talking while somebody else is trying to do their wobbling or their wall tractioning, or they're trying to get in a state of peace before their adjustment. So we made sure people understood that phones are not acceptable in the office, and the team held that up. So it was explained on day 4 and day 5. And if they saw somebody in the waiting room on their phone, they would very politely and very kindly go over and say, hey, can you put your phone away during this time? Just like give it a few minutes, put it in your purse for a few minutes, and you'll be able to get on the phone in another 5 minutes. We talked to them about using the washroom. So the last thing you want is for somebody to grab their number and be ready, at the table or even lying on the table and have to get up and go to the bathroom. If they have to go to the bathroom, do it before they check in. So make sure that they go use the washroom, then check in to go through their routine. We tried to get them at least encouraged to be understanding of that. And again, it was a quiet, respectful, healing environment. We really made sure that people understood that. And then also one of the things on the checklist was to talk to them about, because so many people are, you see this on people all the time. They check in, Facebook check in. I'm here, which is fantastic. It's good. They tag you in their presence, but we made sure that people understood that they're not getting their phone out or taking pictures, especially in the office, or getting other people in their pictures. So there was at least some expectations set at that point. Okay. Missed appointment policy. Again, this was a day 4 checklist thing, is that we had a clear cancellation policy, and that should read 24 hours. We made sure that people understood it was 24 hours in advance, that, if for some reason they needed to cancel, we wanted at least a day's notice, and define the missed appointment consequences, that if they had to miss an appointment, they knew that if they were on a 3-time-a-week schedule or a 2-time-a-week schedule, that missed appointment had to be made up basically the next day. At least this week. If it was on a Friday, it would have to be made up on Monday. So we had to get an extra appointment in the next week. So the team pre-framed that so that people knew that. If somebody came in late, again, they came in late, they're all in a rush, they're in a tizzy. It doesn't mean they jump ahead in the line. We would try to get them in. And the last thing I would want is if somebody came in late to displace somebody that came in on time. So we made it clear that that person, we would try to get them in as soon as possible. But I didn't want somebody who was on time waiting because somebody that was supposed to be there 15 minutes previous or half an hour previous came in late. So people understood that. And listen, stuff happens, and our team was fantastic about, fielding those challenges and making people feel good about it, not making people feel bad about it, but making sure that we, again, tried to set those ground rules so people understood. We wanted to support the commitment and the schedule integrity. So make sure we're making up those appointments the next week. And again, I brought that up, but this is so vital that you pre-frame this, because it's so often people just cancel an appointment. Oh, I'll just bump it to the next week. No, that can't happen. You're on a very specific corrective or healing schedule. You have to keep up with that schedule. It just makes sure you're showing your integrity when you're talking about that or upholding that rule. Payment systems and policies. We talked about the benefits of prepayments, when we talked about getting them on a payment plan. Our missed payment procedures, that if there was a missed payment, obviously that would have to be made up. The team would have to call them and they would have to make amends, whether it's a credit card issue or whatever the case is. So, but we had a policy about that. And if it was continually happening, there would have to be some concession. There would have to be some, and I hate to say penalty, but there would have to be some penalty. So we made sure that the payment policies were upheld as much as possible. Insurance receipts were done at the end of the month or by email. So people aren't stopping at the desk every appointment asking for a receipt. They're done at a certain time, and they're done basically out of office or after hours through email. And all financial discussions happened at the front desk only, not in the adjusting area, or we had to make a special appointment, because the last thing we wanted was somebody at the front desk challenging us about some sort of financial dispute or problem when there's all kinds of other people coming in and out. So we would specifically ask them to set up a special time, or we would bring them into a private room if it was somebody who was maybe a little irate at the time, which obviously didn't happen that often, but there was always those situations. So we made sure we took them out of the normal flow of things. Doctor presence and table talk. And again, this was the specific question that came up about the table talk. And I'm going to say, so I know Dr. Justine did a whole program on table talk, but here's my stance on this is that, and like I said earlier, the time during that adjustment is very sacred to me. I want to be completely focused on that person. And my time with that person, I wanted to be 95% adjusting. So I didn't want a lot of pre-talk or a lot of after-talk. I wanted specific time during that adjustment. It is really vital that you guys train yourself to stop saying, "How are you?" "Hi, Bob. How are you?" You got somebody lying on the table. You've done so well. Your team's done so well to train that person. They're lying prone on their face. You walk into the room, you say, "How are you?" And what do? They start getting up, and they want to get up and sit down and start talking to you about, "Oh, this is what happened after my last adjustment. This is how I feel." Stop that. Stop using "How are you?" This is the most important thing I can tell you about table talk. Stop saying "How are you?" Your table talk should be very productive and very brief. "Hey, Bob, great to see you. Let's get your power turned on." Or perhaps you can have a story of the week. And this is something that I did very regularly, is I would have a story of the week. Use Chat GPT. We talk about this all the time. Program Chat GPT. I am a chiropractor. I want to be very present with people when I see them. And you type this right into Chat GPT. I want my adjustment time to be very sacred. I want it to be a very intense experience during that 90 seconds that I'm with that person. Give me 10 different stories that I can use, that I can go into the room and share with that patient. And it can be just a hypothetical story of a person that healed up or a child that healed up from chiropractic care, whatever that is. But again, you're taking it away from "How are you?" and you're putting the spotlight on chiropractic and healing and removing interference and innate intelligence and the body's ability to take care of itself. And that's a great way to direct the conversation. So avoid those time draining non-chiro conversations. And we all do it. So I'm certainly not perfect, but we all do it. We all get hooked into that. But if you really want to make your time efficient, you have to recognize the time where the conversation goes sideways, where they start talking about sports, or they talk about the weather, or they talk about their next vacation, or these are great conversations to have at the front desk with your team. Team loved getting into stuff like that with people, especially during slower times. It was a great positive atmosphere, but I didn't want it happening at the table. Consults for deeper questions or arrange a call. And again, I would say for the docs, if you get a question that you know is going to require a detailed answer, say, hey, I'd love to give you the time to answer that question thoroughly without feeling rushed. Can we set up a time for a phone call? Or can you email me that question so we can communicate that way? We use Marco Polo. So you could start saying that to your patients. Use Marco Polo. Give me a Marco Polo video call, whatever it is, but defer it away from that adjusting time. And some last things to talk about too. We talked about in our day 4 and day 5, we would prepare that person because we had 24/7 our video testimonial room set up. It was in a corner of a consultation room. And we always told them that, hey, when you start getting great results, we want you to share your great results so more people can understand the benefit of chiropractic care. So we're going to ask you to do a video testimonial, and we've got it set up in the room. Sometimes that would be part of the tour. Like we would actually show them part of the tour. So they would be pre-framed to know. And we would actually start having people ask, hey, I'd love to do a video testimonial because I feel so much better after my last adjustment, whatever that is. And again, if you haven't done that yet, just try it. It's such a hugely positive experience to do. Get an old iPhone, get a tripod, set it up. It's one of the best things. We talked about the children in the clinic. We were a family office. We loved seeing families. We wanted and invited children in the clinic, but they needed to be kept in some control. And we did have families with multiple kids. In fact, we had one family come in, husband and wife, 8 kids. They actually had a passenger van, and they would come in from Norwich, was about 25 minutes away from our office. And they would come in once a week, and we prepared for them because we knew like these kids were crazy. And it was just chaos in the office. So we made sure that we had a private room for them to go in, and we basically shuffled them into that private room so we could contain them so it wasn't just total chaos for everybody else. So prepare for these things. We talked about food and drink. So if somebody's coming in and they're on their lunch and they're bringing their Subway sub and eating it in your hot seat area, that is not okay. We didn't want that happening. Ultimately somebody come in, spill their coffee. We made sure that people understood that there were no food and drink at the table. There were no food and drink in the hot seat area. If they had a coffee or whatnot, leave it at the front desk. Leave it in it. We had a special little area there where we had some goodies and stuff. They could leave it there and get it afterwards. Using the equipment, we made sure that people knew that kids were not jumping on the vibe plates, and they were only to use the vibe plates if that was part of their care plan, right? So we told them that, hey, you know what? Just the vibe plates aren't there for public use. They're there for people that are specifically required to use them. If people were going on holidays, we would make sure that they told us well in advance. And again, this is part of the day 4 script. Hey, if you're going on holidays, you have to miss a week of care, whatever that is. Let's make sure we book around that. We'll get a few adjustments extra before you go. We'll get a few adjustments right after you come back. So we're staying on schedule. So you still get your 36 adjustments in your 12 weeks, so nothing interferes with that. We talked about clothing, especially, whether it's in the summertime where people are coming in wearing next to nothing, or in the wintertime with winter coats and stuff like that. We made sure that people understood what was appropriate to wear in the office to get a good adjustment. And also for those people who came in with lots of scent, like different perfumes and things, we wanted to make sure we kept that at a minimum because people are very sensitive to that. Another thing, and I know Justine will talk about this, is there's a lot of people now that just bring their dog everywhere. So, you want to make sure that if you're a dog-free office, you have to be a dog-free office. And if you're not a dog-free office, make sure that you welcome that. Like tell people, you're welcome to bring your dog here. You have to keep your dog under control. Whatever it is you choose to do, make sure people are aware of that. So, and you may find that people either really embrace that or they're going to say, no, this is not the place for me, but decide on what you're willing to accept. So the last few things here. So remember when you're talking about this, when you're going through day 4 systems, when you're efficient, when you focus on these systems, you put the systems in place, but you exercise the systems, you train on the systems, and you have your team uphold the systems. In other words, you don't break on those systems. you reduce your burnout. For those of you who are burned out in your practice, if you're exhausted at the end of the day, it's because your office is in chaos. When you have people that follow through with what you want to deliver chiropractically, it fills you up. And this is where putting these systems in place so you can start building the practice of your dreams, it's important to be firm on that, really firm on that. And it fills you up. You have a better effect on people and you'll have a lot more fun. When you're consistent, it creates this flow, it creates this rhythm. And when you're in the rhythm, chiropractic is so magical. It's so beautiful, but you have to get in the flow. And when you're in chaos, you can't get in the flow. Train patients, drive referrals. You want to increase your referrals, train your patients. Make sure they know exactly what your expectations are. And the systems will enable scalable growth. So if you want to grow, you want to see more people, you want to make a better income and have better collections, you have to put these systems in place and you have to put the team, you have to train the team to uphold those systems. Okay. Really important.